How much are you suffering from stress, from physical illness, from emotional pain? And does all that affect your ability to see the joy that's available to you in your life right now, regardless of your circumstance? The medicine of mindfulness and mindfulness-based stress reduction, next on Speak Your Mind. Welcome to Speak Your Mind. I'm Dr. Carolyn Phelps, licensed psychologist with the Human Development Center. Our capacity to be truly in the moment, as it is, affects our ability to respond to stress, illness, and pain, to experience joy, and to give and receive compassion. It affects everything about our life because, if you think about it, haven't your best moments been when you've been fully present and fully aware, fully in this moment? Which begs the question, how do we get so far away from this moment? And how can we find our way back? Well, my guest tonight is going to introduce us to mindfulness and mindfulness-based stress reduction and how they can be a path out of our suffering. Now, normally we'd want you to call in your questions about the show, but if you were calling in questions, you really couldn't be fully present with us in our moment here. And that would be a funny thing for me to ask you to do, to be not mindful during a show about mindfulness. So we're not accepting calls tonight. Instead, your job is to sit back and soak it all in. My guest tonight is Judith Lees, a licensed marriage and family therapist and the founder of Seeds of Mindfulness. She's been bringing the medicine of mindfulness through facilitating mindfulness-based stress reduction courses since 1991. Thank you so much for coming here tonight. I just really appreciate that. And I think a wonderful place for us to start is for you to define mindfulness for us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be in Duluth and next to Lake Superior. Mindfulness is having body and mind in the same place at the same time. And physically, of course, that's happening all the time. But really, our mind is usually in the past, rehashing something or regretting something or making a story about if only, or our mind is in the future. And it's trying to plan for, worrying about, trying to control what will happen in the future with a what if. And then our body's in the present moment, but our mind is not there.
And so how do we begin to even bring ourselves back into this present moment if so much of our time is spent either in the moments that have already happened or the moments that we think are going to happen?
Well, if we're talking about mindfulness-based stress reduction, that course, people are learning how to notice when their mind is traveling off into the past or the future. And when we notice it, then we have a choice. We can continue to worry about the future if we'd like to do that, or we can choose to come back into the present moment and into our bodies. So this is really balancing out our body and mind so they're working together for us. We're often stuck in our head and not listening to what's in our body, not in our senses, and experiencing what's happening right now in this moment. And so that's what we're doing, that developing that capability of noticing when we're not in the present moment and coming back into our senses.
And I think that what is confusing for so many people, and I would have to say when I first heard about it, felt confusing to me as well, is this notion of, but if I'm in a pain, if this moment is painful, whether it's physical pain or emotional pain or stressful, tell me why I'm wanting to be in this moment? Because it seems to me I want to be anywhere but this moment then.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the most common concerns and questions that people have. It is your life at that moment. And if we can be open to, let's say, physical pain, then that probably will decrease the physical pain or at least help it to not increase. Because if we want to push it away, get tense, worry about how am I ever going to last the next 5 minutes with this amount of physical pain, then actually that tension will increase the pain.
And it is about that resistance then that we build up.
That's one of the things that can happen. The other thing is that if we can allow our heart to open rather than crack, if we get tight and resistant again to whatever's happening, but to open to fully experience the emotional pain or psychological pain that might be there, then that will always have for us some very important teachers. That if we're closed to it, we will not reap the benefit of that pain that we're experiencing.
And I don't think we often think about pain as necessarily being beneficial, or emotional pain as being beneficial to us. I think sometimes we think it might be necessary, so with the loss of a loved one, or inevitable, but I don't think people often think about it as being beneficial. So will you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, life as a human being will have 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows. I mean, many more than that, probably, actually, but meaning that that's life. And we can learn from, let's say we make a mistake. We say something we regret to a friend, and we feel sad about that. If we can really embrace that with kindness and look at it deeply, we can understand the root of that had us say that to our friend. And then knowing that may prevent us from doing that in the future. So that's just one little example of how it can be helpful to us.
I think, I know acceptance is, the notion of acceptance is a large part of mindfulness. And I would like you to talk a little bit about what we mean sort of in the mindfulness way of thinking of the word of acceptance, because I think a lot of people think, oh, if I'm supposed to just accept that this pain is in my life, it's a sense of feeling resigned, or they have a sense of feeling resigned. And I don't think that's what is meant at all by mindfulness. I'm wondering if you could speak a little to that.
Again, that's one of the most often asked questions about acceptance. This is not about just lying down and taking whatever's coming your way. It's really about being honest and real about what is actually happening. So it might mean saying to yourself, you know, I think I might have a problem with eating. Or saying to yourself, I'm really concerned about my husband's use of alcohol. So naming things as they are. And then if we're fully present, we can more easily discern what would be a really skillful way to address what's really happening.
And so acceptance is really about accepting what is in the moment, not this resignation.
No.
Because I think with resignation comes the sense of hopelessness.
Yes. And powerlessness.
And powerlessness.
Right.
But acceptance of how things really are in this moment opens us up to be more powerful in our choices that we can make. Is that a fair thing for me to say?
That's exactly right.
So I'm getting it. I'm kind of getting it a little bit here.
Well, the aspect of it, of acceptance, yes.
Yes. Tell me about some of the benefits that you see from mindfulness and the benefits that exist for us.
Well, it's really a function of the individual person. Maybe what I can do is give you some examples of what people have reported.
Absolutely.
Mothers saying, my child said to me today, Mom, I love you so much because you're not yelling at me. A former nun, a woman who's 45, saying for the first time, I feel truly happy and free as a human being and a person. And she had struggled a lot with depression. Many people have reduced or totally been able to stop using sleeping medication, greatly reduce their pain medication. Often people will report, and I've experienced this deeply myself, that I'm responsive rather than being reactive. And we're reactive based on what's happened in our past. And then we just have this automatic reaction. It's automatic pilot. It often comes up with irritation, anger, often comes up in addiction. And so people are able to notice that they're having great desire. And actually, desire for a mood-altering chemical or nicotine only lasts about 45 seconds. And if we can notice that and not grab for that glass of alcohol, that will rise and fall all on its own. And so people start to realize that they do really have a choice, and they aren't powerless.
Let's go back to what you just said about how like a craving for something may only last for the 45 seconds. Because I think people's experience of cravings are, number one, that they last for hours, or that if I don't grab for it, the craving gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So the curve just continues to ascend, 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 ascend.
Mm-hmm. It all has to do with the mind. And one of the most important aspects about mindfulness is that we start to realize that we're writing stories in our head. So if I had a craving for a cigarette, if I just notice the body sensation of that craving, then it will rise and fall in 45 seconds. If I start to write a story in my head about, oh, I'm not going to be able to make it during this class period, I'll never be able to deliver my speech, I'm a no good person because I can't get off these cigarettes, that will increase the desire for the cigarette. If we can let go of the story writing, then that physical sensation will just rise and fall all on its own in 45 seconds.
And I got to tell you the story about the very first time I spoke with Judith on the phone was right before I had to go to the dentist, and which used to be not one of my favorite places. That used to be the story that I told about the dentist, was that it was one of my least favorite places. And her parting words to me, as I'm saying like, oh, I have to go to the dentist, I'd much rather talk with you, were, don't write stories about what's going to happen. And I said, oh yeah, okay, yeah, and I hang up the phone, and I'm thinking like, that's, what is this about? And then I was there, and that's when I noticed the stories I was writing.
Mm-hmm. We all do.
And I thought like, well, what if I tried? Because I know I'm miserable there anyway. I could try her way. Mm-hmm. Maybe I might be less miserable. And that was an amazing revelation, that what happened when I stopped writing the story that I was going to be in more pain, and that I might be in, like, that sound means I might be in pain.
Right.
And what if I just listen to the sound and let it be?
You're getting a master's degree in mindfulness already. Absolutely, yeah.
Talk about some of what are, so you talked about like people are able to reduce pain medication from that. Mm-hmm. And part of what I think what you're saying is that that you're able to build up a tolerance for being in the moment with that pain. Is that a fair way for me to put that? And if not, then you correct me.
Well, there's a number of things that happen. That's one of them. That we aren't writing the story in our head again about, well, if I don't take my pain medication, I won't be able to handle this. I won't be able to go to the party. I'll be in bed for the next 2 weeks. And so we ride just the physical sensation. And if we're not writing that story, we're not getting then the muscle tension that adds to the increase in the pain. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that if we drop into our body and all of the sensations in our body, well, I'll tell you an example of a grandma. It was the day of her grandchild's first birthday party, and she got up and she was in horrible pain. And she thought, I really don't know if I can go to this party, but I'm going to get dressed. I'm going to do my awareness of breath meditation. I'm going to see if I can let go of any story writing that I'm doing. Her son picked her up, brought her to the birthday party. They opened the door, and there is the 1-year-old with his birthday cake where? All over his face and all over his tray. She didn't feel her pain anymore because her awareness was not just on her pain, it was on her whole life, and in this case, her 1-year-old grandchild.
That she was able to take in the universe and make that part of her world, as opposed to previously where her whole universe was becoming the pain.
The physical pain.
The physical pain.
Yes, right.
That is just such a beautiful story. So that's a little bit about mindfulness. Tell us about mindfulness-based stress reduction and how that works.
Well, it's an 8-week class that Jon Kabat-Zinn designed in the 70s, and it takes people through a smorgasbord of skill building for mindfulness for longer and longer periods of time in their daily life. So they learn awareness of breath meditation, they do mindful yoga, they do mindful eating, mindful walking, awareness and mindfulness of activities of daily living, reactive experiences, pleasant events, unpleasant events, stress reactions. And in every 2.5-hour class, we meet for 8 weeks, and for 2.5 hours, people are sharing their experience together with the homework that they've done and struggling with it and asking lots of questions, and they're actually all teachers for each other. I'm the facilitator, but everyone there is learning from everyone in the class. And we have an all-day retreat after the 6th meeting. It's from 9 to 4. People are silent and building mindfulness in everything they're doing all day long. It's usually a beautiful and profound experience for people. They get to experience that the craving that they had for more coffee or a cigarette, or the difficulty they have with boredom or physical pain, if they don't have to do anything, and they will notice that it changes all on its own.
And that, I think, must be a lived experience, because when I hear stories about silence retreats, I think like, oh, I'm pretty sure I'd fail that.
Well, I think most people approach the day of mindfulness with a lot of fear.
Yeah.
Because that's not how we usually are with a group of people. We're interacting.
Mm-hmm.
There's also no eye contact in that day of mindfulness. And actually, it's usually a very, very peaceful, ease-filled, deeply calming experience for people.
And it's something that's so out of our everyday normal life too, right? Mm-hmm. I think that is some of the hesitation of the, I have no experience doing that in my life. And it seems like in our society now, where there's almost a demand to multitask, which is the antithesis.
Yes.
The opposite of this demand to, where's the demand to be mindful to counteract the demand to multitask?
Well, what's really interesting in all the research that's been done is that we are actually, and this is not about necessarily being productive, but we actually are more productive being mindful because we aren't making mistakes. And we have all of our brain available for the task that we are attending to at that time. So actually, it's much more helpful and skillful in the world than multitasking is.
And all of the research shows that we believe we are much better at, everyone believes they're good at multitasking, yeah. And none of us really is good at multitasking, and we're not as effective as we think we are. And so not only are we not as effective as we think we are when we're multitasking, but mindfulness is the key to being more effective and being more of who we want to be or aspire to be.
And who we truly are.
And who we truly are.
As well, because many people have stories about who they are, and they live those stories out rather than allowing themselves to just be who they are. Well, I have to be a certain way. I can't tell a joke. I can't be humorous. I can't be angry. I'm a meditation teacher, so I have to wear a certain type of clothing, maybe not big earrings, rather than just being who we really are. We need that, just like in nature. We need the uniqueness of each individual person and each individual species collectively.
That just sort of brings me to this concept, because we were talking about acceptance on the one hand with respect to accepting the moment and accepting what is, and now you're also talking about what came to mind was sort of accepting ourselves and being accepting and non-judgmental towards ourselves. And boy, we as human beings seem to have a difficult job with that. Will you talk a little bit
Yes.
about how we can, that notion of being non-judgmental, and how we can begin to incorporate that into our life?
Well, there's a number of things here. One is whatever is happening, if we knew the root causes of someone who harms another person, either physically, emotionally, psychologically, if we knew the root cause of that for that person, we would probably weep. And in mindfulness, that's what we know that, and then we understand that and have compassion because we know that that person truly must be suffering in some way. In judging has a very narrow focus. It's always I, me, mine, and according to my wishes. And that's a very tiny focus. Let's say you have a wedding planned in California, and you get up in the morning and it's pouring rain, and it was last year, a year ago, when there was an absolute horrible drought in California. We would be rejoicing and dancing if it was raining in California, but we won't do that. We would judge it as being negative because it's our wedding day. And that's just a metaphor. In mindfulness, the teachings are metaphors. So an example represents multitudes of examples like that.
And then when it comes to, and we're sort of drawing short on time here,
Okay.
When it comes to judging ourselves, how can we begin to sort of release some of that self-judgment? Because I think that is a message of hope.
It's the same thing. Whatever that we have said or done, and now we're judging ourselves negatively about that, we want to invite a curiosity to look deeply at what the root cause of that is. And there's a root cause that makes sense. And then we have compassion and loving kindness for that pain, perhaps, that happened a long, long time ago, that set us up to, of course, we took this action. So it's really looking very deeply at life and at human beings and as ourselves as human beings. Organizations, corporations, politicians.
I like that notion of approaching ourselves also with just a gentleness rather than the stick, right? And I think we often are a stick culture. And certainly have become good at turning the stick on us. But for us to become a gentler to ourselves and a gentler to the culture at large.
And the stick is also perfection.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I always like to have my final question be, what would be your message of hope to our viewing audience with respect to mindfulness?
Message of hope. It's really important to trust the manifestation of all things. When conditions are sufficient, things manifest. And to trust that. Whatever that is, to trust it and be open to learning its teachings.
And not judging it, just accepting and trusting it.
Its manifestation, yes, whatever it is, and then being skillful in response to it or working with it.
That is a wonderful message of hope. One of my favorite mindfulness quotes is that there is more right with us than there is wrong with us, no matter how much is wrong with us. And I really like that last part, because I think a lot of us walk around thinking that there's so much wrong with us, and just the idea that there might be even more right with us, that is a message of hope too, and is very freeing. thanks so much for joining the discussion and just sitting back and soaking it in. And don't forget to visit us on the web at speakyourmindonline.org, where you can find a schedule of our topics and resource links. And you can look Judith up on seedsofmindfulness.com. Join us next week when we'll be talking about schizophrenia. I'm Dr. Carolyn Phelps. Thanks for watching and good night.